Take it away, Melly.
Okay.
Action.
All right, cool. So for the sake of the demo and like I kind of wanted to show like the whole span of the process. So I'm gonna kind of just right now go through materials. So right now we have the 5x7 linoleum. We have our tools. These are my tools. They come in more shapes and sizes and different facsimiles. We also have a speedball brayer, and we have this, which is like a stamping, but it helps with like the printing in the application. But if we don't have that, you can use one of these, a rolling pin. That's for like, I guess like more of like the block materials. But then besides the block, we have a piece of glass so that we can put the ink on and apply it and roll it with the brayer. And we also have this razor knife to help with ink cleanup, this palette knife, ink knife, to help with ink application onto our slab, which is this over here. And last but not least, we have our oil-based ink from Speedball. I'll just do that quick turn, but that's not until we print. I wanted to show like just a quick image transfer technique, which is I think will really work for this project since a lot of it is like drawing based. So here I have my stencil. I have the drawing of the design. So what I basically did is I took this piece of tracing paper and I put it over and I traced it directly as it is. So this is what I have as my stencil. So the beauty of this is when I print this, I want this to read like exactly the way it is. So I want it to read legibly. So when I print it on here, it's gonna have to be backwards. But the beauty of this is I don't have to make this backwards. I can just flip it over and directly trace. So what I'm gonna do now is just set this up perfectly so that it doesn't move when I'm tracing. So I just go, after this, I just directly trace over what I already traced. I recommend tracing with like a high B pencil, so like a 6B, but like anything from like a 4 to like a 9xxB. And you do want to apply like quite a bit of pressure when you're tracing. All right, I've traced it completely. Now I take the tape off. So now I have this exact stencil. So now I know like what I'm carving. But a trick I like to do, because it's easy to confuse, like I will just like do this. Like I'll just like kind of like just do this marking so I know, like, so I can like remind myself like, oh, don't carve this. Like do not like carve everything but this. All right, sorry, I'm gonna just do that. And then that's just like a good reminder, or you can even just write like, do not carve. So now the fun part, the carving. I will preface this with never, ever, ever, even though it's inevitable, everyone does it, do not carve facing yourself. You never want to carve this way because it's just dangerous. Like it really is just dangerous. And I've gotten cut many a time, even though I've been told so many times, don't do that, don't do that. But I mean, you know, we're human. But I'm here to tell you again, don't carve towards yourself. That's just dangerous. How I like to carve is like I like to kind of have the block here against this, and then I have kind of like with one finger holding it down, and then I just like follow my line, and I just push, and then I'll just show you that small part. Obviously, this is not that much of a carve, but the best way to do carving, I would say, is like fluid. Like I would say just like kind of like move it as smoothly as you can. I mean, obviously like people can do this a little faster than me or like faster at times, but I think like the biggest thing that you want to keep in mind is like just having a consistent and like smooth flow or like smooth speed. But there's like a lot of different techniques you can do. Like you can like do that, like the following the line thing that I'm doing where it's like I just like follow. But some people do like to kind of like take a bigger one like this and like kind of just like tackle all the negative space first, and just like, you know, like just go at it like like this, like where it's like, boom, there goes a line. There's like, and then there goes a whole chunk of it. So this is what I've been doing. So it's kind of like just following the line completely, or you could, you know, just tackle the negative space and like work on that like texture and like movement carving. But yeah, I think right now, I guess I'm just going to focus on like getting the negative space out. Another thing you can do though, I did use pencil, but if you are like scared that your hand is going to like mess that up, I would recommend maybe going over this with Sharpie. This is what I do. But yeah, and you can just test out like different like carving shapes or different methods. I'm not the best cross hatcher, but like you can cross hatch like in here, so I'm gonna try and use that up. Obviously this is gonna get carved away, but a lot of people like to do this, like kind of just like flicking it up, and that gives it like this kind of texture, and then like the cross hatching part will just be like against that. Again, move your fingers out of the way, like you don't want that. You just don't want it around anywhere. And then that gives you like this cross hatchy texture. So it's really similar to drawing in terms of texture, but also not, just because it's way more like, I guess, like permanent or visceral, I guess. So that's that. And then with letters, which is what I have here, these letters, I have to be really careful. So if you're going to take your time and be really slow on anything, I recommend on that being the letters, just because it's so easy to mess these up. And I just suggest getting like your thinnest, smallest knife. I'm going to do that. Oh my God, I'm going to do that thing that they do on YouTube. Like, what is this? And just go at it. And with letters, always like give yourself, I would say, like a little extra room around. Another thing people I think forget to think about is like move your block, like use that as like an advantage, because it really will help with like the flow of things. Like feel like just move your block, play with it, like whatever feels more comfortable for your hands, and like how they naturally move is really the key to this. It does get a little rough sometimes, like at the edge, it's like a little harder to carve, but you just gotta give it that extra like elbow grease. And again, just be careful with your fingers. Don't put your fingers in front of it. It will result in a cut and blood. But also, I think like that's like a rite of passage for anyone doing like Linocut, is like you have to get cut a few times. So don't be scared, just be careful, because it's real out here. My thing is carve everything first shallow. Like obviously, like if you can get it deep, get it deep. But if you're like gonna like, I would save the cleanup towards the end, because then it's just a little bit more easier, and you kind of like have more space to do that. Just because it's just a little smoother process cleaning up than like trying to get everything super deep on the first go. And also, like, don't be afraid to like just follow the natural lines of things. Like if your knife is kind of like, oh, I want to stop here, listen to that.
Now, is there something you can do if you've like cut away a part of your image by accident?
Some people kind of do like spot treatments where like they'll just get like a really, really small stamp of like linoleum, or even like this other, oh, I'm going to show you. I was like, I have it. This is like more rubbery than it is linoleum. It's more used for like stamps, this material, and like, cause it's just so easy to carve. It's like super flimsy. They might get this and just kind of like spot treat it. Afterwards they print like the original, and then they kind of use this to spot treat. I do know of that. And then some people, yeah, they'll just do it like with paint, ink, whatever, like afterwards. But there's also, yeah, no, that's really all I know. I don't really, because again, I think another thing that people is like, oh no, I'm just gonna have to work with it. I have to work around it, and I have to just like work that into the image, just because it is what it is. But
which is why I'm like, just be careful, take it slow. Again, and like all of this is just like getting used to like the material. Trying to think of some other hot tips that I've accumulated over the years. Okay, I have one. So I have this one blade that's like a knife. That's like kind of like more of a straight up knife. So let's say say I'm carving here in this corner where it's like really tight. And I'm like, oh, I really don't want to cut into my image. So a thing I'll do is like, I'll outline these lines with this knife. I'm gonna try really hard to show what that looks like. So like, I'll just kind of like go over those lines with this knife. So when I carve down now, there's an incision at the bottom of here. So the knife kind of just like naturally stopped there, or like it's already getting flimsy. And I just like kind of pull that out, and then like that's where like the incision was, and it like kind of stops it from like going. Nice. So that's another hot tip. I was like, there's one more. I'm like, I keep forgetting it, but. And then another like nice like nib tip or like knife that will like help with these fine corners. This is one of my favorites for like corners, is like a V-shaped. Oh, wait, wow. Shaped like a V. And it's like really good for like these like tight corners where there's like, you know, these stuff, because it's already in that like 90-degree angle. So you can like really get in there and like take it out without like too much of an issue. And even like letters too, like with this A, like that's my, like I have an A here. And what I like to do is I just like kind of like just dip the tip of this V into like the top of like that little hole for the A, and then just like do a quick like little scoop up, and then it works. Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like, so if you, with this knife tool, what you can do is like you can cut something without having to like carve it out in a sense. So with this like V shape, I just like went in for this V, with the V, and I have like the little hole of the A, and it's like sticking out. It hasn't completely cut out, and I'm scared to like go in because I'm like, oh no, I could get the whole A. So I'm like, oh my God, it's so hard to show it. But the point is, it's like sticking out kind of like a splinter here, this A. So, which I just went in with the V tip, and I just kind of like did a. So what I'll do is I'll cut it with this knife, and then I have that clean line. The part that's like hanging out, I cut it with this knife, and now I have like this like pretty decently like clean A whole thingy. And this is like the, the piece that I carved out, which is like super small, but again, like goes to show like how much like small detail or like how precise cuts you can really get with like minimal movement, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm using, but it's just this like basic like gray linoleum. It doesn't have any backing, but I like this linoleum because it's not super stiff, but it's also not super flimsy. I like this because this linoleum is able to handle curve a little bit more than that like brown yellowy linoleum. It's a little bit easier to get these curves in, and this is like why this is like kind of like my favorite linoleum to use.
Is it advisable or not advisable to like run a proof of an image when you're not done carving it?
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to actually recommend that. I'm going to try and get the outline of these cactuses done, and then I'm going to do that because I want it to be at least, I want you guys to see something. I have my not finished block, obviously, but we have this. So what I like to do is like, I like to kind of like, if you're printing from home, it's so, since you don't have like the register on the press, it's so important to like register how you want your print here. So what I like to do is I set the paper down, and then I set like where, I mean, obviously like it'll be print to size, but just for the sake of the demo, kind of like put this on top, like where I want the image to be. And then I like put a mark, like I put tape. Tape is your best friend. So I'm gonna put tape where I'm imagining, like where the edges of the paper are. So like the 4 corners, so that when I set the paper, when I print, I won't have to be like, oh no, is this centered? Like, is it not centered? You'll know. Okay, so there goes that. That's like where the paper is. And just like slide that out the best you can. And then again, like just try to imagine exactly like where you'd want it. So now put the 4 corners of tape. So I have my ink and I have my palette knife and this is more for cleanup, so kind of don't worry about this until later, but I have my palette knife. So what I'm gonna do is I obviously like open my ink, kind of just like give it like a little shake, even though it's oil-based. And then you're gonna just like put like a dab of it. It's a little oily because I haven't opened it in a minute. I'm gonna read it a little bit more. How much you want is like, it's difficult to like, I guess like guess, but usually people like, I would recommend like a puddle like this size, like around, not this size, but like a little bigger than this. Again, this is like kind of just only gonna do one, so that's why I did so little. And then you wanna like play with it a little bit. You wanna like move it around just to like get it going. Maybe I should have done that big of a pile, and well, it's fine. We'll see. So I kind of have that line of ink, and then I take my roller. And the key to rolling is, it's hard to explain even like in person, but I'm gonna try. So I'm gonna go up, down, and then when I'm pulling it down, I want to let it roll, because you want it to roll so it can like not land on the exact same space. So do you see how I'm like letting that roll? Like it's like
yeah.
Up, down. So it's, you want, because you want the ink application. So I would recommend like 1, 2, roll, 1, 2, roll. And like, it's more of like a natural movement. Like you can't really like command it. It just kind of happens. It's like, again, so it's like velvety, but not like super shiny, and you don't like see the ink texture sticking out. This is like perfect. Like this is, I would say this is like a really, really good. People usually call it like an orange peel. You want to look for the texture of like an orange peel. So now, and I'm going to ink the slab, but in the slab ink application goes the same as like for this. So you want to do the same thing of like, getting that in there. Here we go. Up, down, let it go. Up, down, let it go. And I would say like, you want to ink the whole thing up first, like a few times. So I'm gonna say that's pretty good for now. So I'm gonna go back to my markers that I have here, and I'm putting this like where I put my linoleum block tape, and I'm gonna go back and get my paper, and I'm gonna put it, I can't put it directly on there obviously because of the linoleum, the height difference, but you're gonna kind of just like follow it the best you can. So there we go. And you want to just kind of like initially kind of just like put your hand there, and then you're going to either get this tool. So you just want to like get in there. But if you're using a rolling pin, same thing, is just that you're using this, but you want to put a lot of pressure on it. Like you want to like really like give yourself an arm workout, really. It's just because you just really want to ensure that that image is going to come through. You kind of want to see some of it like sticking out. I'm going to try and like, it's hard because I didn't carve too much, but I don't know, like you can kind of like see like the mark of the paper. You kind of want to go for that. And then the first print's always going to be a little salty, but this is like my first proof. So what this tells me is I need to, well, also this paper is just not printmaking paper. So this paper is also just not good for what we're doing. But what this is telling me is like, more pressure and more ink. But also the first print is always going to come out kind of janky just because it's the first print. And the linoleum is like getting used to and grabbing all of the ink that's in there. And then after that, you really just like keep going in. You just like, all right, next one, next one, next one. And it's just that process repeated. I'm going to grab another tool that you could use to print. That's also more time consuming, but also this paper is not printmaking paper, so this is gonna potentially look terrible, but like, oh, or maybe not that bad. But see how like there's like these like spots where like, oh, you needed to rub more there, or like, oh, you spent more time here. This is just, you need to really be consistent with this, and you need to like really take your time, and you need to like really be on it. So that's just like, this is another thing you can use. It's just a little bit more time consuming and detail oriented, I'd say. But my favorite is this, and if not, use this for sure. I would use one of these, a little bit more even pressure, because that's the whole thing, is like this is like really easy to get uneven pressure, and you get like, yeah, like these like holes of like, oh, that's a little bit more dark there, that's a little bit lighter there. But this is the top thing to use, but this is like expensive, I won't even lie. But this is the next best thing in my opinion.
So if you have 2 layers, they're on 2 separate 5x7 linoleum pieces, and you just know that when you're doing your drawing transfer with pencil, that you're just drawing it based on that 5x7 shape, so that they'll inevitably end up in the right place when you print them.
Or just because for the sake of this image, oh my god, I'm actually just going to use blocks. I'm going to use 2 blocks. So these are my 2 different stencils. You can work around like 2 layers on 1 block, but just because of the image I have, it's a little harder. So I just decided to do 2 blocks, which again are the same size. So I'm just going to like do the exact same thing. I'm just going to go over that. Like I trace this, I'm going to do the exact same image transfer process, carve it, print it. But the thing is, since this is my lightest layer, this is going first. And then I'm going to print like the cactus and the words on top of that.
How long do you have to wait before you'd print a second layer?
Okay, if it's water-based, a few hours. If it's oil-based, 3 days, 2 to 3 days. Just because oil-based takes longer to dry because of that oil. So it like needs to completely harden, which again is like the pros and the cons of oil and water-based. I will say oil-based just looks better. It gives you a flatter flat and a more like pigmented flat. This paper is not the best paper for printmaking, so this kind of doesn't really show that off. But I just would recommend oil. But yeah, to do another layer, two days at least for sure. Okay. Which is why like when we print them, like I'm gonna carve 2 of these of each. I'm gonna carve 2 of each layer, so that we can kind of like do one, let that sit, and then just do the other like faster. I think it's important to like kind of like work in steps, or work with your layers. So it's like keep that in mind, and like kind of let's like remember that like what needs to go on top and what needs to go below. What you want to do is since I have all this newspaper, I kind of don't really care what happens to it. So I kind of just like clean my brayer on the newspaper. And as you can see, I like rolled here. We have this super dark spot, but after even just a few inches of rolling, it's already getting kind of lighter. Always this part up. You never want to put this down because it's gonna, well, one, it's just potentially damaging to the brayer, but you could also just like put ink somewhere where you do not want there to be ink. So always put your brayer face up, I guess. So to clean, this is fun to me. So start with this ink knife, and you just want to like hold it again, like hold it like your knife, and just go, you just want to scrape, And this is where we get this beautiful guy. I will tell everyone that this is just a good thing to invest in general. This like grease lightning. I like usually kind of just spray this on here and it turns, and it's fine. Like it actually will be like, the grease part will clean it up. And then this is like totally fine. Now it's ready for whatever else it needs to do. And I'm actually gonna take you guys to my sink for this next part. Ignore the kitchen. So how this works is like, so we have this. Another thing you want to do before you get to this part, actually, that I'm not going to do because I'm a bad person, is you're going to like put newsprint on this and kind of like do that. You're going to pretend like you're printing on the newsprint just because you want to get the ink off. But so I'm going to wet this. I just like wet it a little bit. And then I'm going to take like dish soap. I just put that on there, kind of like. It's already like cutting through. But yeah, that's how that works. And then I just like clean this until it's like completely clean. Hope that made sense. I hope that all like looked okay and I didn't sound like I wasn't making sense. So